push the PC members to add something to the effect. Not always happened, sometimes it did happen. Add something to the reviews saying that they had looked at the rebuttal. So we tried, and we have to give these specific instructions because people are not going to do it otherwise. But even when there is discussion, we want to make sure that it is communicated back to the authors so that they recognize that at least their rebuttal was read. Sometimes that is.
So I think that's a great point, but it's also the case that in some, as I said, each guy is a federation of reviewing cultures, and some sub-communities, SPC members and area chairs just did this. I mean, as I said in one of my mails, I have seen the world's largest meta comment ever, a meta review ever, and it's probably longer than all the reviews combined, for some of the other papers. And so people do take this extremely seriously. It's still very important that we should remind them, but it is well taken seriously. Who stood first? Go ahead.
So just going with the theme of outrageous suggestions, right? So another one. One of the things that I've noticed in the years of reviewing and running a few of these things for classes and so on is for reviewers who refuse to engage for whatever reason, right? One of the things that seems to work is if you explicitly question some of the things that they omitted or some of the things that they did wrong, right? So one of these suggestions, and again, we'll have to discuss what is a sensitive way of doing this, right? Is instead of the 3 reviews, maybe have 4 reviews, right? Where 3 of the reviews are your regular reviews. The 4th reviewer is doing more of a meta review, right? And the reason that an SPC can't do this is because of scalability issues and all sorts of things, right? But the 4th reviewer is more of a meta reviewer of the 3 reviewers who have been posting comments about the paper, and they call out explicitly if one of the reviews is of poor quality, if they got something obviously wrong and so on. It's just so that they leave a trail, they leave a marker on there, and then you have to respond. If somebody calls out explicitly that, hey, what you said here is wrong, or you did not, even understand this part of the paper, you did not address this part of it, then I come back and I have to respond to it. And usually that generates more of a response. Again, like I said, it has to be handled sensitively. We don't want to, everything to evolve into a fist fight, obviously. But that's a possible idea. I don't know what the panel thinks about that.
So I think it's actually a very great idea, but I also think that I don't think we should be too sensitive about this. I think it's okay to be argumentative and to push people to do their job. I think it's fine.
Yeah, I actually want to add something. I just want to emphasize something that Andrew said. Again, this is an international conference and we come from different cultures, and one of the things I do when I have my students, I tell them that different cultures have different assumptions. In India, where I come from, you're supposed not to say how good you are, you're supposed to keep your mouth shut. Other people will, if you're any good, will say you're good. In US, where I'm hanging around, if you keep quiet, they think you have much to be modest about. And so in general, the idea that if you say something, I should basically not defend it is something that might be a cultural issue. But I think it's very, very important to defend your reviews. The maximum trouble that I had in handling the marginal papers, borderline papers, were cases where people would say, this is a great paper, +5, no comments as to why it is a great paper. And I think it's just, if any of you are doing it, not because of laziness. If you're lazy, hopefully you won't ever get back onto the program committee. But if you're doing it because you're afraid that it's kind of, not right to basically push your point across. That's the whole point of being a reviewer. You want his blue ribbons? Do that. Okay, then you'll get them. Okay, yes, please go.
Okay, so some people mentioned the NIPS experiment. So I think there are at least 2 lessons very relevant to this forum in the NIPS experiment and also in other less ambitious experiments in CHI and other places. The first is that the structure of papers, so it's not that it's completely random, like some people sometimes cite the research, it's that there is a thick layer of maybe 30-40% papers that are somewhat borderline, where it's harder to decide, but there are a lot of papers that are clear reject, and some papers that are clear accept. So we can use this both to reduce the reviewing load and to reduce the randomness in a 2-phase review. First, always say 2 reviews, and if it's a clear reject, you don't ask for more reviews. Another way you can ask for either 1 or 2 or even 3 more reviews, depending on how borderline the paper is. That's maybe the smaller lesson. The larger lesson is that these experiments are very important. And when we're talking about Burning Man, so we're learning the data in more than one way. We can use this data not just for future decisions, but also for future research. And Michael said that this is a mechanism design problem. Well, we need data to figure out what's the correct mechanism. So clearly there are anonymity problems and other problems that should be taken care of, but there should be a way to do it, not just in this conference, but other conferences release some data about the user reviewing process. We can definitely, people in this community can use this to improve the
Anybody wants to comment? Well, I'm personally in favor of using NIPS as a preprocessor for HCI and TPI. Because having submitted papers to NIPS and knowing how things happen there too, it's a great conference, but reviewing cultures are very, very, very different. I think NIPS experiment is really, if you ask me, it's a reflection of NIPS reviewing culture than it is about reviewing in general. In HCI, if you were to do this, I don't think you would get the same sorts of results at all, because as much as we talked about some crazy cases, most of the reviewers take things very seriously. So I would only do NIPS to scale up to millions of papers, so that, otherwise I think people actually do, it's not at all that random, anywhere that random in HCI.
This is why we need our own experiment.
Yes, yeah, so you could do this. I was worried that reviewers might not like me if I were to do human experiments. Apparently NIPS doesn't have this kind of problems. But anyway, go ahead.
I just want to make one quick comment. So when you do a two-phase reviewing, typically your reviewing cycle becomes longer. And also making sure that at both intermediate deadlines, so one intermediate deadline and later deadline, people actually do the work, because as we know that people usually tend to wait until the last minute. It's not very clear whether this is going to work for the conference as large as HCI, but it's a good thing to try.
So actually I would emphasize that point. I think CVPR tried the two-phase reviewing once and they haven't gone back again, as far as I know, just again because of the length of time needed to run the two phases. So you can reduce the amount of cumulative work spent if you can increase the make span in planning terms. But so Malti.
Yeah, I wanted to say a few more words on the question of the rebuttals, the reactions to the rebuttals. So you keep praising our community, so maybe I can have this good perspective. But in my experience, 80–90% of the people in cases where there is a serious need for discussion do read the rebuttal, react to it in the comments, but often do a very poor job of communicating that to the office. I think that's to some extent then also the SPC member's job. But also when that doesn't happen, as an SPC member, as an area chair, I've actually made it a policy to actually say very clearly in the meta review, one reviewer didn't react to the rebuttal, we've completely disregarded their opinion, this review kind of doesn't count, doesn't qualify. And I also call it out there to actually make it clear to that person, if they're following the emails at all, that this is not an optional part of the process. It's not quite the same thing as not reviewing the paper at all, but it's not very far away, because you're supposed, there's this promise to the authors that, you can get your feedback, we'll take it into account, and if you don't do that, you're lying to the authors. So at that point, I'd actually say, this person didn't do their job, and possibly recruit an additional reviewer if that's possible. Usually that is actually possible, or do it yourself, because that's just a failure to do your job. And I think I'd encourage other people to treat it the same way. If there is something brought up that might influence the decision, there's no reaction to that, that's simply not acceptable. But I also want to make the point that this happens much, much more rarely than what you would think as an author, because you just don't get to see the discussion.
Anybody wants to comment? Looks like we all agree with you, but so go ahead.
I think a few people mentioned this rebuttals seems to be a problem, and from my limited experience as a student and my friends, I feel that rebuttals are fully ignored in the sense that the decisions are made, and part of it maybe is because if a reviewer is going to change his opinion dramatically, then it will question top in the first round. So I have some suggestions to improve the rebuttals, but I think even before considering suggestions, it is important to identify that this is a problem, and then after that try to solve it. But as you saw from other people, it is a problem in the sense that writing a rebuttal or just not writing a rebuttal is not going to have any effect on your paper.
So I think this is what you believe, that people don't write rebuttals. Whether or not you write a rebuttal doesn't seem to have any impact on your paper.
No.
Is that what you believe, or I'm not sure what you believe?
Well, I think most people will write the rebuttal, but from my experience and my friends and my experience is highly limited, it doesn't seem that it is going to change the situation. Like, because you have this grading in the first round and
Okay, so let me say, so the two things, in each guy actually the rebuttals were considered, and secondly, as an author, I always feel none of you guys are reading my rebuttals, but I just came out of having looked at 2,294 papers. I can assure you they are read, okay, most of the time. We are only talking about fringe cases and how to improve that, but if any of you are thinking rebuttals are not going to be read anyway, I won't write it, do it at your own peril. Okay, because reviewers actually, in fact, multiple times people have pointed out there is not even a rebuttal, and that is actually negative in most of the time, and they are right. So again, we have to realize that when we see it just as a single author versus what gets seen from top, and that's something that came up with Michael's points too, that a lot gets done in the discussion, it doesn't come up, it doesn't get summarized in the meta comments, meta review. If there is a way of doing it automatically, such that somehow you sanitize the discussion and just share it with the authors, half of this angst will go away. I think most of the angst is basically people just assume that people are not reading their paper, but it actually gets done.
So you think that rebuttals kind of change the opinions of reviewers?
Yes, indeed. I would be happy to even make up those, compute those statistics and put up somewhere. But just I can tell you that's definitely does happen.
Yeah, that would be a great experiment to do too. I'm not aware of any data on it, but having read many reviews and rebuttals and discussions, I can certainly vouch for the fact that very often opinions are changed. There certainly is a tendency toward inertia. One anchors on one's own initial opinion, but usually not, to an infinite degree. It's subject to revising. I've seen many cases where a reviewer will say, "Oh, now I understand this thing that wasn't clear before, and I'm changing my review."
Let's
Just want to add, so at the ACL conference, the review form has a button that after the rebuttal period, the reviewers are asked to check the button, to say that they have actually read the review. So that's some kind of help, at least they have to log in and make that check.
I'm afraid that might very well be like the EULA, end user license agreement that we all have ticked and given away our organs to various companies. So when we come to that point, I think things are lost anyway. So people, it is true to put this, but I would just make a bot which will just tick all my red buttons. So.
The other point is, do we have any statistics that says what are the changes between before rebuttal period and after rebuttal period in the sort of the recommendation scores that are given to papers? Do you have if you have some of these statistics, right, that would tell people that there are actually significant changes that happen
Yes, I think
after the
that
rebuttal.
sort of statistics should be shared. I think Lydia is here somewhere. I will get her to look into that data for each guy. That is actually, I think again there is this point, part of the reason for having this is this beautiful saying that justice should not only be done but should be seen to be done. And if you have done any of these conferences, you realize that as an author you always feel that the world is out to persecute you. And when you run the conference, you think, my gosh, the authors are allowed to persecute the program committee, right? And obviously, I think bringing this up, and for example, listening to Michael say that, in fact, it does change. Rebuttals do change people's minds. and having those statistics sort of reduces the chance. If you don't mind, Toby, let Edith speak because we are coming down on time. Just because of new people will talk, and then you can get back.
So I actually want to continue with the topic of rebuttals and say something that probably goes against what's been said so far in this room. Okay, so first let me say that in my experience as an SPC member, area chair, PC as well, so rebuttals often have an effect on the decision on the paper. So it happens specifically if a reviewer genuinely couldn't understand some argument in the paper, asks about that argument, the author clarifies, and then the reviewer is much happier to accept that paper. Right? And this is a constructive use of rebuttals. But what I see, I think in 80% of the cases, is that the reviewer says, okay, so I don't have any technical complaints, but the paper is not interesting, is not significant. Right? And then the author's rebuttal says, no, my paper is actually important, interesting, and significant, and reiterates the arguments from the introduction. Right? And, well, you wonder why these rebuttals are not responded to? Well, constructively. So what I wanted to suggest, so I know that the cryptography community does something along these lines. Perhaps we should be more selective in asking the authors to provide rebuttals. So perhaps it could be the SPC's job to look at the reviews, to see if there are any technical questions to be addressed, if there are any kind of strong claims made by the reviewers that the author can constructively address. But if the reviews are, say, overwhelmingly positive, or if there are judgments that are clearly a matter of taste, maybe there isn't that much value in asking the authors to spend their time crafting these careful 250-word or whatever rebuttal responses.
Okay.
Because that's a significant load on the authors. And to me also, so one more thing. So I remember, so I'm old enough to remember the days when there were no rebuttals. Right? And then the notification deadline was a bit like Christmas morning, right? So you open your email and there are some presents waiting for you, or maybe if you've been naughty, right? So just a call them. Right? So rebuttals take a big part of that, and to me it's a real loss.
Well, so I agree. I mean, one has to consider what is the role of the rebuttal. So it should not be that you start engaging with the author, or that the author try to persuade you that the work really is nice, significant, and important, but it should be a filter in order to prevent misunderstandings and that serious flaws in the reviews are detected. I think this should be the real role of the rebuttals. And I think rebuttals are important because it's a quality assurance, because reviewers will mind a bit more what they are writing if they know that there are rebuttals, but authors can respond to. But as said, this should be just a filter that critical misunderstandings are avoided, but not something to push papers in.
Okay, so since we are almost running out of time, I wanted to at least bring up two things to get a sense of the people here. One was there was a point about whether double-blind reviewing is still relevant. We can have a major discussion, but I think because of the time, why don't I just again take one more straw vote? That's not binding for anybody other than anybody who wants to follow that straw vote. So how many people think that double-blind reviewing should still stay in place? Okay, I assume that gives sort of a sense. Okay, that's one thing that's very useful to know. So basically, I guess with flaws and all, that is something that we want to continue is what I feel. The other one small thing that I just wanted to bring up is archive. There were at least several cases in this year's Inchikai where there was text plagiarism. And this is a murky ground. This is not technical plagiarism. You know, as computer scientists who can't write for a living, we think that all the introductions are anyway fluff. And so if somebody else already has written an introduction for my problem, why can't I just put that there? And you know, so it's like there has been a case that I had to deal with where just the reviewer found that different paragraphs of the paper are completely widely varying styles. Some are extremely polished, some are not at all polished. And so she went and checked these paragraphs and found paragraph 1 came from paper 2, paragraph 2 came from this other paper. Now, in that particular case, actually the paper's technical contribution is not plagiarized. It wasn't plagiarized, it was a new paper. But what they thought was the fluff material, that A-star search is a great search, they'll just copy those lines. And the tricky part is, it's become extremely easy to detect these. The same thing that made you get this information into your paper by Googling, we can do the Google back. And those of you in the audience who like this practice, please think twice or even 3 times, because at least one paper we actually eventually were able to prove that it was textual plagiarism is for sure there, and that sealed its fate. Okay, and so this is something we probably don't take it that seriously because I think it's just not, it's text, it's not equations, but that's becoming an issue. So we are at 4:37. I think we probably want to have coffee, and so I would like to end by basically saying again, none of this is to say that the reviewing culture here is broken. I think there are a lot of things that are done very well here, and again, thank you for your engagement here, and let's thank all the panelists.